the reason why we're here is that Supervisor Avalos has 2 items concerning medical cannabis on the agenda today. The first one is item 3, and it's basically shutting down and shutting out any further permits from his district. And it's very premature because we actually have an item which is going to be us in discussion with our planning commission about opening up the green zone. So if we're going to have this discussion about opening up the green zone, why does he get permission to kick everybody out of his neighborhood? I mean, it makes no sense. So one of our key points is this is premature. Why don't we wait till the planning commission comes back to us, lets us know what green zones can be opened. It's also really unfair because there's a few people that have entered the application process and he wants them to just get booted out of it. And Access of Love is taking the position that this isn't fair. They applied and they should be judged by the same rules as everybody else on the map out there. Now, we don't know these collectives, we don't know these patients, but we care about them because they got their stuff together and they wanted to open up a collective, you know? And now all of a sudden, midstream, they're going to change the rules up on folks, and that's not fair. So Access of Love is going to be calling for fair policy today for item number 3, and we're going to state that this is premature. There's no reason to go into the planning code until we meet with the actual planning commissioners and look at some areas we could open up. Is everybody with me on that one?
Yeah.
And the other thing that really concerns me is this is tucked inside a legislation that's about vice. It's about liquor stores, it's about adult massage parlors, and it's about gambling. We are not a dangerous substance like alcohol. We are not an addictive pastime that could harm people like gambling. And we're not adult massage parlors, which, you know, everybody can have their own opinion on, but we're not sort of in that category, and we're not harmful to neighborhoods. We've proven that we bring public safety, you know, and it's really sad because it took us, you know, a lot of time to get where we are in this city, and we've had so many clubs get closed down. And the supervisor doesn't seem to be concerned. Woo! Yeah! The supervisor doesn't seem to be concerned about relocating our clubs that have been federally shut down either. So we had a team in meeting with the supervisor this morning, and Attorney Nicoletta was on that team. If you want to come and tell us just what your impression was of the meeting.
Well, you said most everything, you know, regarding what John was saying earlier. He doesn't seem too concerned about the clubs that have been closed. He basically just has the position that cannabis is going to be lumped together, cannabis dispensaries, with these other establishments. And he says that, you know, he's getting complaints, and he was talking about plastic baggies on the floor. Things of that nature. So
Bubble parking.
Yeah.
What about the candy wrappers, all right?
Right. I mean, you know, well, I didn't hear about that this morning at least, but he is taking a hardline stance on this, and he didn't seem to be very negotiable. So I say it's premature as well. I say that we need to open up green zones in other areas before we start shutting clubs down and denying permits.
Yeah.
Avalos, of course, is going to support his own legislation and has rallied the neighborhood groups. Not a day goes by as a patient advocate where I don't hear patients say, I miss Vapor Room, I miss Divinity Tree, I miss Sanctuary, I miss HopeNet, etc. You know, we need to they need to go first.
Yep. Right.
And it's because, you know, it's not just a store to a lot of folks.
Right.
There was a lot more going on there and a lot more connections going on, and there's no reason that those guys should be in the back of the line when they helped open up this whole process.
Right.
Parking, double parking.
What,
So-
that's a complaint? That's the only complaint they have?
That's all I've heard, you know. I mean, who knows what the neighbors are going to get up and say, and let's not play into it.
On the corridor, we don't have very many clothing stores. We don't have a place to buy stationery or art supplies. These are very limited things, but these are things that neighborhoods really need. And instead, we've been having a real difficult time with some businesses that are actually coming into our empty storefronts that are causing a great deal of havoc along the corridor. Now, I'm not talking about MCDs. I'm actually talking about one of the things that this legislation doesn't address is proliferation we have of cafes that have computers where people can actually do slot machine gambling. It's not quite called gambling, it's called sweepstakes winning. You can actually win up to $3,000, maybe even more in a sitting while you're there. And so what you have is that you have commercial corridors. Our commercial corridor seems to be thriving on people who are in desperate need of cash and ways to actually augment their meager income. We also have parts of our corridor that exploit it in other ways. Along the corridor from Brazil to Geneva, we have 4 payday loan places where you could actually, you can, before you get paid, you can get cash, and you can, for a large portion that's probably usury, pay back that loan when you get paid. That is something that is not necessarily supporting a really good neighborhood serving business. Here we have 4 right there in the commercial corridor. We have a place where you can turn your gold for cash on the corridor as well. And so what you're finding is that a lot of people, the corridor right now is a place that is not just the way other parts of San Francisco need to thrive. And you have a lot of people who are basically, they get some cash in the corridor, or they find places near the corridor to get cash, and sometimes it's not in the best legal way. And our corridor is now a place that isn't quite as safe as it was before. 2 weeks ago, on a Wednesday at 4:30 in the afternoon, there was a young man who was shot and killed right on the corner of Mission and Brazil Street, broad daylight. Seniors going by, children going by, something that no neighborhood should experience ever. And where my neighborhood, the Excelsior District, was shaken greatly, a few years back by a whole number of homicides. When something like this happens, it sets us all back to a real fear that we've had over the years. And so, while I would love to come forward with a piece of legislation that will say we're going to be building wonderful, affordable housing and neighborhood serving, housing with mixed-use slots for businesses on the ground floor. We have a portion of that does this legislation that does do that. We actually have to first and foremost make sure that we're building a corridor that is actually not going to have a lot of the negative influences that have come with check cashing places and some liquor stores as well. Now, folks who are here, and there'll be many of them, and be challenging on this legislation, who represent the interests of people who need access to medical cannabis, are going to say, well, you can't link medical cannabis to all these other negative impacts. And I tend to agree with you on that. And we'll hear more of that. But when my neighborhood corridor in the Excelsior District is backsliding in the other direction, to add medical cannabis dispensaries into the mix where we're not getting other diversity of businesses, it's actually going to have a detrimental impact on the poor. Where now people who actually go to the internet cafes who are smoking in public, smoking cigarettes in public, and we can't seem to get them off the corridor or get them outside the places where their smoke is not going to get into the youth centers that are there, the senior centers that are there, and the other stores that are there. We now add to the mix, at times medical marijuana or marijuana smoke that comes in, and it creates this real sense of unease in the neighborhood. And so I've actually dealt with politics on this in a real strong way the past couple of years. Last year and over this past year, 3 medical cannabis dispensaries have come to the neighborhood. I did not take a strong position against them. I actually said that there should be access to medical cannabis in my district. I didn't think that we should have 3 all approved all at once or 2 on one block, but I felt that we need to actually explore ways to have access all over San Francisco. And if I believe that there should be access all over San Francisco, I was not going to say that there shouldn't be access at all in District 11. And so I accepted the fact that I could get 3 MCDs, which are now in my district. Now there are one MCD that's currently there wants to spin off and have an MCD across the street from an existing MCD, and then another MCD wants to be on the same block where the other 2 are. And I don't really think that this makes a lot of sense. I don't think it's very reasonable to expect that while access is limited in many parts of San Francisco, that we create more places for MCDs to come in a particular neighborhood that's already has a great number of MCDs. I don't believe like putting 2 more MCDs where we already have 3 MCDs increases access at all. And I am interested in increasing access. And that's why I have my second piece of legislation moving forward, so we can actually have that before us and direct the planning department to come forward with an actual study of how MCDs can be cited in the future. And with those recommendations, I'll be coming forward to the full board, and probably back to this committee again, to legislation that would actually have a broader set of regulations. So we will see certain neighborhoods be the ones that are going to be receiving MCDs coming in the future. That to me is about increasing access, and that's what I want to be able to do moving forward. But it's going to take cooperation with my colleagues, and I think I also need to make sure that my colleagues are looking at making sure they're keeping all MCDs from their neighborhoods and just being satisfied with there being certain neighborhoods like the Excelsior or parts of the Mission or the South Market or parts of San Marino Avenue in District 10 as the places where only MCDs can be cited. That to me is not about access, and I would actually live up to that by promoting something that I think would be useful for all of San Francisco. So I know that there's some controversy about these measures. I don't think there really should be, but I understand that people have concerns about touching the third rail of medical cannabis dispensaries and how they're situated in San Francisco. I'm willing to hear everyone out, and I would like to see at the end we can move forward on how we can make some improvements to my commercial corridor in District 11. So I do not have anyone presented necessarily from the planning department. Someone from the planning department, please identify yourself and come forward.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. My name is Aaron Stein with the Planning Department. As touched on by Supervisor Avalos, the proposed ordinance would create the Outer Mission Neighborhood Commercial District along Mission Street from Alameda Boulevard down to the county line. The Planning Commission heard this item on April 18, 2013 and voted for approval with modifications. I'd like to thank Supervisor Avalos and his staff for integrating the Commission's changes into it. I understand all of them have been integrated into it. In addition to the CU for MCDs within a certain location of other MCDs. We have also started to do some research on the report that you requested. I've spoken to some neighborhood groups as well as some MCD operators, MCD advocates, Department of Public Health, and the Police Department, so we're moving along on that. We'll have a pretty robust report for you on that. And that pretty much sums up my comments. Of course, I'm here for available for questions.
If you could just summarize how the provisions of this legislation work in terms of what we have for fringe financial services, height limits or bonuses that we're providing.
Sure. So fringe financial services would be prohibited here within a quarter mile. There's a buffer around that. I believe it already exists in the district, but this integrates that into the new neighborhood commercial district. Medical cannabis dispensaries require a conditional use if they're located within 500 feet of another one. And it provides a 5-foot height bonus for buildings with a larger ground floor. I believe it also gets, it increased the density allowed in some of them. It was certain areas were some density 2, and now they're being bumped up to density 3. So.
And along alcohol and parking.
Alcoholic parking is no longer required as well. And these are all great planning policies that we're looking for here.
Great.
The notice for this hearing did not make clear that the city would in fact further restrict the green zone in District 11 along this corridor. The second issue I have is really on the substance of the item number 3, which is that MCDs and patients alone are going to be subject to parking restrictions or requirement for a parking plan, transportation plan, whereas no other business is subject to those requirements. The question is, why the different treatment? Why the unequal treatment when a patient's vehicle takes up no more room than that of a patron of a nail salon, bicycle shop, any other type of business? And the third problem that I have with this, Supervisor Avalos, is that, in fact, at 2 public meetings, you indicated that you had contacted planning commissioners and planning staff with respect to these planning applications in order to prevent them from going forward. And we don't think that that is proper. We think that that's interference with the department's administration of the law as it exists now, not as it would like it to be its own future. And that is why these applications have been delayed. And in fact, they were submitted prior to your legislation, and the legislation was expanded, the corridor was extended in order to pick up what you drag. Those are some of the concerns, there are some others, but there's no need to rush this forward. People should have a meaningful opportunity to participate in the process. And I think that this attempt to sort of hush and rush this legislation through is not right.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. My name is Shona Dokenar. I'm just going to fill in the access of love spot. I have a concern just about fairness of process. I know that there's a few dispensaries that have applied and are in the pipeline. And what I'd like to see is that everybody gets fair rules, the same rules as everyone else. And I think this is a little bit premature. I think we need to look at what comes back from the planning department and how the planning department works with patient advocates on their concerns about access. And so I would ask that we could really reconsider item number 3 until we get the feedback and the input from the planning and our community members so that we can make a good map. And I appreciate that you are looking towards opening up zones that haven't been opened up, and that is a problem, but we can't address that problem by starting an unfair process. And I echo the same comments as Mr. Ward before me, that our community should not be lumped in with dangerous things like alcohol and gambling and adult massage parlors, and I don't think that the use of medical marijuana will create any type of adverse neighborhood impact. In fact, we are partners with the city on public safety, and it's been proven that we increase public safety around every dispensary, and our task force also unanimously voted in support of compassionate care and having the city work with us on programs like Healthy San Francisco and being inclusive of our patients that are denied access because of affordability. And so these are discussions that I would like to see the city further, and I'd like us to hold on with item number 3 until we're all able to meet on item number 4. Thank you.
I'm here in support of cannabis use, recreational and medical use. We need to work on making the green zone bigger so we can have more access to have more dispensaries, to have any dispensary shut down for any reason is not fair. I'm hoping that and working together to have dispensaries where we need them. Thank you.
Medical Cannabis Task Force. I was representing the National Policy Seat on behalf of Americans for Safe Access. I'm a lifelong resident of San Francisco's Mission District, and I went to high school and spent many of my teenage years in the Excelsior District. We've had 4 closures of dispensaries in the Mission, and the one remaining dispensary has been threatened to close by the federal government. I have concerns on any restrictions that the city is going to impose on any medical cannabis dispensaries. I'm here today to talk about a continuing discussion that's over 8 years old on what's reasonable for our green zones. I'm here to share my concerns because I cannot agree to stricter zoning regulations without understanding and seeing what the green zone map is going to look like. I have sympathy for the murder that you discussed, as I too witnessed 2 people be killed at the age of 15. But that had nothing to do with the fact that our area was red zone for alcohol permits, nor the fact that I live next door to a dispensary. The murders had nothing to do with that. I could not find the agenda online, and I was very confused when the written notice on item number 3 had no mention of medical cannabis dispensaries. I find that very deceitful for the public and the patients who are trying their best to give you guys public input on this process. I also have concerns about the 500-foot restriction in the cluster. The cluster is a result of our current regulations. That's a consequence of what you guys put in writing. To hold those consequences against dispensaries when they have paid permit fees and done everything required seems very unfair at this point. I also feel that competition increases quality, selection, and price. Please do not support further restrictions until we have a study and we consider what this is really going to do for our city. Thank you.
Thank you for the next speaker. I'll call more cards. Brent Saub, Teresa Cooper, Jason Bennett, Dominique Johnson, hang on a sec, Albert Weiss, AJ Martinelli, looks like, Archie Hinkle.
Hello, my name is Denise Dorey, and my family are immigrants who immigrated from Scandinavia in the 1920s, and we immigrated to Chicago, a few blocks from where the St. Valentine's Day Massacre took place, in a culture of prohibition. And a culture of prohibition affected my family very, very profoundly. There were no jobs, just like there are now, kind of mirrors right now, you know, banks were out of control. We had a prohibition culture, and it destroys communities. The prohibition culture does, and it affected my life as well. I had to, like, immediately, it was a long process of realizing that I'm in this culture of prohibition. I'm not going to let it take me down. So cannabis is getting better press than ever now. And it's getting better press than prescription drugs lately because it's on the right side of history. The boozer prohibition was on the wrong side of history. We've got to leave that behind. It ruined it. So I am against this legislation in all due respect. I respect the author of the legislation very much, and I agree with him very often, but this time I don't.
I was a member of the Medical Cannabis Task Force Legal Legislative Affairs Committee and Patient Advocacy Committee. And I'm a member of as well. I'm in support of number 4 here. But number 3, I'm first of all very upset, as Sarah Schrader said, that it makes no reference to medical cannabis. So a member of the public that didn't know what was going on today would be blindsided by this. There's no real appropriate notice given. This is about restricting medical cannabis access in the Telstra district. And I think that's a very serious problem. And I also think it's a problem when you refer to a sense of unease in the community. I think that's discriminatory. I feel that that's it's really a very negative thing to say.
I'm here to say that I support this proposed neighborhood commercial district, and I support severely eliminating the density of MCDs in this neighborhood. We have the highest concentration of children and elders in the entire city. Our main street suffers from litter, graffiti, and now a proliferation of businesses that may provide too much of a temptation for our at-risk youth.
There needs to be a policy discussion about dispensaries in San Francisco, where they should be placed, where they should be located.
Negative businesses, and if we actually had our district going in the other direction, where we were actually seeing a greater diversity of businesses coming in, I don't think the MCDs would be so much of an issue. But when we see that a lot of businesses are very negative, we add MCDs to the mix, it doesn't make the neighborhood feel very comfortable on their own commercial corridor. And that's something that I think as a supervisor, I need to really be conscious of and aware of, and to really stand up with my community on. And I'm unfortunate that people feel that this is about targeting MCDs. That is not my intention, but I can see how you can make that conclusion.
I'm a San Francisco ASA Americans for Safe Access core member, also a director at Spark in San Francisco here. And I work in a dispensary that is less than 500 feet away from another dispensary. And what we've seen with having 2 dispensaries there together is a much improved block over what was there prior. I started working there before we were open. The neighborhood was a lot different. We only helped that with our security, our presence in the neighborhood, the foot traffic that generates that actually helps those other businesses that you're looking for. And as far as the 3 dispensaries opening in your district, I think it's important that those open because those were just replacing ones that were shut down by federal interference. We need more access throughout the city, and to simply say that you can't have any more dispensaries in one district while not granting any other opportunities for dispensaries to open anywhere else in the city just isn't fair. And it's not the right way to start a process of opening up a green zone. We need to start with not a negative, we start with a positive and move forward from there. We know, and I think you made reference to it in your opening statements, that there is a study that says that, a RAND Corporation study that says that crime is reduced around dispensaries. So that just helps all of our neighborhoods, particularly ones that are blighted. I want to thank you for your continued support. I know that you've always been there for us, and I want to point to some of the good operators in our city that we need more of.
With access of love, I've also served on the Medical Cannabis Task Force, the Legal Committee, the Patient Advocacy Committee. I have a friend that owns the Medical Cannabis Dispensary. I've worked at that dispensary several times. What I know is that the planning department actually wants to increase the green zone. I'm sorry, Mr. Avalos, but that is true. And I don't know why you're railroading, this whole ordeal to get your way. People that smoke medical cannabis are disabled and poor. And taking a look at the mayor's comment on the homeless situation, he's not scoring real high. And so in my mind, you're not scoring real high because when I even tried to talk to you about medical cannabis, when you were running for mayor, you didn't have time to talk about it. You said you'd talk about it when you became mayor. Well, I'm really concerned about some of the views and that you would take on your district. If we look back to Terraville, Denise Schmidt was taken off that Terraville police station. Carmen Chu, there was a lot of bad PR going on in the street. So I'm not really believing the complaints. I think that you are possibly going in with other people to turn against our community. We need medical cannabis dispensaries, and that's a fact. And the poor and disabled are the ones that are using those services. So just consider who you're impacting, really.